My name is Alexandra Cooper. I'm 28 years old and a lieutenant in the United States Navy. I was born in a small coastal town in Virginia, where the sound of waves crashing against wooden piers was my childhood dream. I grew up watching the large military ships come and go from Norfolk Naval Base, dreaming of the day I would command one. Today, I want to tell you about the night that changed everything in my career and my relationship with my family, especially my stepfather, Richard. Richard came into our lives when I was 12. A former Marine with 3 tours in the Middle East, he brought with him not only medals and decorations, but also that aura of authority that only those who have experienced war up close can exude. My mother, Jennifer, had been widowed 3 years earlier when my biological father, a commercial fisherman, was swallowed by the sea during a sudden storm. She found in Richard not only a new love, but also the stability we so desperately needed. From the beginning, Richard and I developed a complicated relationship. He had very fixed ideas about gender roles, and while he respected military women, he always made it clear that he expected me to follow a more feminine path. When I announced, at 17, my intention to attend the Naval Academy at Annapolis, he simply shook his head and muttered, "You don't know what you're asking for, girl." Despite his veiled disapproval, I managed to get into the academy, graduating in the top 10 of my class. I majored in naval engineering and defense systems. Richard attended my graduation wearing his Marine Corps dress uniform, and although he gave me an awkward hug and said, "Good job," I could see in his eyes that he still thought I was making a mistake. Over the next few years, I served on 2 different destroyers, participated in operations in the Pacific and the Mediterranean, and slowly built my career. Richard, however, never failed to make small comments during family gatherings. "How long until you get tired of this and come home?" he would ask. "Or have you met any officers who would want to marry?" As if my career were just a phase before my true purpose as a wife and mother. My mother, ever the peacemaker, tried to change the subject or soften her word, but I could see the worry in her face every time we returned to this familiar territory. Tension. My younger brother Charlie, who was born when I was 15, the product of my mother's marriage to Richard, grew up, idolizing both me and his father. By 13, he was already declaring his desire to follow in the family's military footsteps, which filled Richard with pride. All of this was the backdrop when I received an assignment to the USS Monterey, a guided missile cruiser based in Norfolk, my hometown. For the first time in years, I would be serving close to home. I decided to rent a small apartment near the base instead of staying at my mother's house, a decision Richard interpreted as further evidence of my lack of commitment to family. The night that changed everything, I was off work. It was a hot Sunday in July, and my mother had insisted I attend the weekly family dinner. "Charlie misses you," she said over the phone, using my weak spot, my relationship with my brother, to convince me. I arrived promptly at 6 p.m., dressed in civilian clothes, jeans, a simple t-shirt, and my old Naval Academy coat. The house remained the same. A blue and white colonial overlooking the bay, Richard's fishing boat moored at the small private pier, and the unmistakable aroma of my mother's Sunday roast filling the air. Charlie ran to hug me as soon as I opened the door. At 13, he was almost my height, his blonde hair identical to mine, but with Richard's intense brown eyes. "Alex!" he shouted, throwing his arms around me. "Did you bring something from base?" It was our little tradition. Whenever I could, I'd bring him some naval souvenir, a cap, a patch, a model ship. This time, I pulled a keychain with the USS Monterey emblem from my pocket. "Wow, it's your cruiser?" His eyes lit up as he examined the small metallic object. Richard appeared in the hallway, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He was helping my mother in the kitchen, something he always did on Sundays. Despite his old-fashioned views on certain matters, he was always an equal partner in household chores. "Alexandra," he said with a nod. "Looking good." "Thank you, Richard," I replied automatically. Years of military service had taught me to respond to greetings with courtesy, regardless of personal feelings. My mother appeared right behind him, drying her hands on her apron. Her face lit up with a smile, and she rushed to hug me. "My girl, I'm so glad you came. We're almost ready for dinner." Dinner started off smoothly. My mother served the roast with potatoes, carrots, and peas, the same meal we'd had every Sunday for as long as I could remember. Charlie dominated the conversation, talking about his high school swim team and how his coach said he had state-level potential. "Swimming is a good sport for a future military man," Richard commented, winking at his son. "Builds endurance early." I took a deep breath, anticipating where the conversation would go. Richard looked at me, as if expecting some kind of reaction. "Charlie has a natural talent in the water," I commented, trying to keep the conversation neutral. "Remember when I taught him to swim, Mom? He was barely 4. "Yes, you've always been an excellent swimmer," my mother smiled, clearly relieved by my peaceful participation. "I remember when you competed for the school team." Richard helped himself to some more roast and then asked the question I knew would come eventually. "So, how long will you be in Norfolk this time? I hear the Monterey is scheduled for a deployment to the Persian Gulf soon." I took a sip of water before answering, feeling the familiar sinking feeling in my stomach whenever we discussed my career. "Actually, I received some news this week," I said, deciding it was time to share the information I'd been holding back. "I've been selected for an advanced training program in defense systems. If I'm successful, I could be promoted to lieutenant commander sooner than expected." My mother's expression lit up. "That's wonderful, dear. Congratulations." Charlie let out an admiring whistle. "Wow, you're going to be a commander? That's amazing, Alex." Richard, however, just frowned and continued eating. His silence weighed more heavily than any words. "The program lasts 8 months," I continued, determined to see it through. "And after that, I'll probably be transferred to the USS Abraham Lincoln, the aircraft carrier?" Charlie asked, eyes wide. "Yes." I smiled at my brother, appreciating his genuine enthusiasm. "I'll be in charge of a defense systems team." "That means you're leaving again," Richard said finally, setting his cutlery down with a little more force than necessary. "You've barely returned and you're already planning to leave." My mother gave him a warning look, which he completely ignored. "It's an incredible opportunity," I replied, keeping my voice calm and professional. "I can't refuse." "Of course you can't," Richard snorted. "Career always comes first, doesn't it?" "Richard, please," my mother intervened, her voice strained. "Let's celebrate Alexandra's achievement." "What's there to celebrate?" he asked, his tone rising. "She chose a life where family always comes second, where she can never have stability, put down roots, start a family of her own." "I have a family," I replied, feeling the familiar heat of irritation creep up my neck. "And I have a career I love." "The two aren't mutually exclusive." Richard let out a short, bitter laugh. "Look at you. Almost 30, single, living on ships and military bases. Is this the life you really want? Or are you just trying to prove a point?" "Richard!" my mother exclaimed. Charlie looked from one to the other uncomfortably. He hated it when we got like that, and he was usually the first one to leave the table when arguments started. "I'm not trying to prove anything," I replied calmly, though I could feel my heart racing. "I'm serving my country just like you did." "It's different," he insisted. "Why? Because I'm a woman?" "Don't put words in my mouth." He pointed his fork in my direction. "You know very well what I mean. I chose to serve, did my missions, and then came home to build a real life. You're running away from real life, hiding behind your uniform." My blood boiled in my veins. But years of military training had taught me to maintain my composure in tense situations. I took a deep breath before answering. "My life is real, Richard. It just doesn't fit your narrow definition of what a woman should do." He tossed his napkin on the table. "Here we go again with this feminist speech. It has nothing to do with being a woman. It has to do with priority, with understanding what truly matters in life. And what would that be, in your opinion?" I asked, unable to keep the sarcasm from my voice. "Marry the first officer who comes along? Quit and have half a dozen kids? Is that what you consider a real life?" "Respect your stepfather, Alexandra," my mother interjected, her tone firm. She rarely took this disciplinary role with me, especially since I became an adult, but she could see the argument was getting out of hand. "Sorry, Mom," I mumbled, not really feeling it. Richard shook his head slowly. "You don't understand, and maybe you never will. You think you're doing something heroic, but you're just running away from real commitments." Then my phone rang. The distinctive ringing indicated it was from the naval base. I excused myself and answered. "Lieutenant Cooper speaking." The voice on the other end was tense, urgent. One of the base's duty officers was contacting me directly. "Lieutenant, we have a situation in your neighborhood. We received reports of an armed man 3 blocks from your apartment. Local police are responding, but since you live in the area and are off duty, I thought I'd alert you." A chill ran down my spine. My apartment was in an area primarily occupied by military personnel, mostly junior officers like me. Understood. Any details on the suspect? Caucasian male, approximately 40 years old, seen with what appears to be a semi-automatic rifle. He was seen near the Seaside View apartment complex, my complex, where several of my classmates lived with their families. "I'm on my way," I replied instinctively. "Lieutenant, this is not an official order. The police are handling the situation. This is just a precautionary alert." "Understood, but I know the area well and can help with coordination. I'll be there in 15 minutes. I hung up and looked at my family, all of them staring at me with expressions ranging from concern to confusion. "What happened?" my mother asked, her face pale. "There's a man with a gun near my apartment," I explained quickly, already standing up. "I have to go." "Go?" Richard stood up too. "Go do what?" "That's the police's job, not yours. I have colleagues living there, families with children. I know every entrance and exit of that complex better than any local police officer." "This is crazy," Richard said, blocking my way to the door. "You're off duty. You're not even armed. What do you think you're going to do?" I looked him straight in the eye. "Whatever it takes. It's my duty." "Your duty?" he repeated, incredulous. "Your duty is to stay alive. It's not to throw yourself into a dangerous situation unnecessarily. It's to think of your family, who will be devastated if something happens to you." "Richard," my mother placed a hand on his arm, her voice shaking. "Let her go. She knows what she's doing." But he didn't move. Instead, he looked at me with a mixture of anger and genuine. "You won't go. That's an order." Something snapped inside me. Years of pent-up tension, of trying to prove my worth to a man who never truly saw me as an equal, finally boiled over. "You're not my commander," I said, my voice dangerously low. "You don't have the authority to give me orders." "I'm your father," he exclaimed. "Stepfather," I corrected automatically, immediately regretting it when I saw the pain in his eyes. A heavy silence fell over the dining room. Charlie was pale, my mother on the verge of tears. "You're right," Richard said finally, his voice devoid of emotion. "I'm not your father. And clearly, you made your decision about your life a long time ago." He sat down heavily, staring at his half-eaten plate. "You're finished in this family, Alex." Finished. The words hit me like a physical blow, but there was no time to process the pain. Lives could be at risk. "I have to go," she said simply, stepping around him. My mother caught up with me at the door, grabbing my arm. "Be careful," she begged, tears streaming down her. "Please be very careful. I'll be back," I promised, hugging her quickly. Charlie appeared behind her, his young face contorted in a mixture of concern and admiration. "Alex, ... it'll be okay, little one," I assured him, ruffling his hair like I used to when he was younger. "Take care of mommy." I ran to my car, a used Honda Civic I'd bought when I was stationed in Norfolk. As I drove, I called my colleague, Lieutenant James Martinez, who lived in the same apartment complex. "Martinez, Ads Cooper, are you home?" "Affirmative," he replied, his voice tense. "I see police movement outside. What's going on?" "Armed suspect. I'm on my way." "Which officers do you know are in the compound right now?" "Besides me, Lieutenant Rodriguez with her 2 children, Lieutenant Commander Phillips and his wife, and I think Midshipman Way as well." "Okay, try to contact them discreetly. Tell them to stay away from the windows and, if possible, gather in a single apartment, preferably in the middle of the building, away from the entrances." "Understood. Do you have any plans?" "I'll coordinate with local police when I arrive. For now, keep everyone safe." I cut the throttle and increased my speed, staying just slightly above the speed limit. My mind was racing, analyzing the situation as it would in a simulation exercise at the Naval Academy. An armed suspect, a residential area, civilians present, including children, multiple entrances and exits to the complex. Probably not enough. Police to cover all angles. As I approached the complex, I could see the flashing lights of police cars blocking the main. I parked a block away and approached on foot, identifying myself to the first officer I saw, Lieutenant Alexandra Cooper. United States Navy. I live in the complex and have information about the residents. The officer, a middle-aged man with a badge that said Sergeant Wilson, looked at me with a mixture of relief and wariness. Lieutenant, we appreciate your help, but this is an active scene. We need civilians to stay away. I understand, Sergeant, but I'm not exactly a civilian. I have crisis training and know this complex better than anyone. Besides, several residents are military personnel, and I can help coordinate with them. He hesitated, then nodded. Okay, come with me. Captain Russell is coordinating the operation. I was led to a mobile command vehicle, parked a safe distance away. Inside, a man in a police captain's uniform was bent over. Blueprints of the apartment complex, surrounded by other officers. Captain, Sergeant Wilson called out. This is Lieutenant Cooper of the Navy. She lives in the compound and is offered assistance. Captain Russell looked up, quickly assessing me. What can you tell us, Lieutenant? I know there are at least 5 active-duty naval officers on the compound at this time, including families with children. I've already contacted one of them and asked them to regroup in a safe location. I also know all the entrances and exits to the compound, including some that may not be on the blueprint. This captured his complete attention. What kind of entry? There is a maintenance passage between buildings B and C that is not shown on typical floor plan, and the roof of building A has access to the rear parking lot via a rarely used fire escape. The captain nodded slowly. That might be helpful. What's the current situation? The suspect was last seen near the main building, correct? Any idea of his intentions, or if he has a specific target? We're not sure yet. We've received several calls about a Caucasian male armed with a rifle. Some witnesses said he appeared to be looking for a specific apartment, but we have no confirmation. A cold sensation ran down my spine. May I see a full description of the suspect? The captain hesitated briefly, then signaled to a detective who handed over a tablet with the compiled descriptions of several witnesses. White male, 3545. Years old, approximately 6'1", short brown hair, unshaven, wearing military green cargo pants and a black jacket, carrying what appears to be an AR-15 or similar weapon. Witnesses report that he specifically asked about the naval officer's apartment. My heart raced. There were several female officers in the compound, including myself and Lieutenant Rodriguez. Captain, this could be personal. Either I or Lieutenant Rodriguez could be the target. She's in apartment 307 with 2 young children. The captain's face hardened. Do you have any idea who might be after you or her? I shook my head. Not immediately, but we both deal with discipline and safety on board. We've refused licenses, reported violations. It could be someone with a grudge. Understood. We are attempting to establish communication with the suspect, but so far, he has not responded. We have snipers in place and have evacuated most of the residents from the adjacent buildings. What is the plan of action? At the moment, restraint. We don't want an armed confrontation if we can avoid it, especially with civilians potentially in the line of fire. I nodded, analyzing the situation. If I may, Captain, I'd like to try to contact Lieutenant Rodriguez directly. I can advise her on how to safely exit with the children through the passage I mentioned. He considered for a moment. It's risky, but it might work. Our officers can provide cover as you exit the pass. But I want to make it clear, you're here as an advisor, not as part of the tactical operation. Understood? Perfectly, sir. I picked up my phone and called Rodriguez. He answered on the first ring, his voice a strained whisper. Cooper? We're locked in the bathroom. My kids are terrified. I'm with the police, Rodriguez. We believe the suspect may be looking for a naval officer. You or I could be the target. We need to get you and the children out of there. What? He was seen in my hallway. Remember the maintenance door at the end of the hallway? The one that leads to the passage between the buildings? Yes, but it's always locked. The code is 1775, the year the Navy was founded. All the maintenance codes in the complex are the same. I can see your apartment from the blueprints here. If you exit the bathroom, turn left, and follow the bedroom hallway to the back door, you should be able to reach the main hallway without being seen from the living room. What if he's already in the apartment? I felt a knot in my stomach. Are you armed? A moment of silence. I have my service weapon in the room safe. If you can reach her safely, do so. But the priority is the children. The police will have officers waiting at the exit of the crossing to receive them. Understood? Understood. I'll try now. Keep the line open. I want to hear everything. The next few minutes were possibly the longest of my life. I could hear Rodriguez's controlled breathing, the occasional muffled sobs from one of the children, and the soft creak of the floorboards as she moved around the apartment. I briefed Captain Russell on every move as he marshaled his men into the extraction position. "We're in the hallway," Rodriguez whispered eventually. "I can see the maintenance door." "Great. Remember, 1775. Once you pass, turn right and go all the way to the end. There will be a staircase leading to the underground parking lot. The police will be waiting there." "Understood. We're—" A loud bang came through the phone, followed by childish screams. "Rodriguez? Rodriguez, he's inside!" she shouted, abandoning her secrecy. "He's kicking in the front door. Run! Now!" I heard more noises, shouts, the sound of running footsteps, and then the distinct crack of gunshots, 3 in quick succession. "Rodriguez, we're fine," she replied breathlessly. "We made it through. We're in the passage. The kids are fine." I let out a sigh of relief, realizing I'd been holding my breath. "Keep moving. Don't stop for anything, Captain." Russell was speaking rapidly into his radio. "Armed suspect confirmed in apartment 307. Tactical team, prepare to enter. Extraction team, confirm position in underground parking garage." A few agonizing minutes later, confirmation came over the radio. "Civilians safely extracted. I repeat, Lieutenant Rodriguez and 2 children are in our custody, unharmed." A wave of relief swept through the control room, but we didn't have time to celebrate. The next report came almost immediately. "Suspect is on the move. He's left apartment 37 and is heading down the main hallway. He appears to be checking other apartments. He's looking for someone," he told Captain Russell. If it wasn't Rodriguez, then ... double quotes, the realization hit us all at the same time. "He might be after you, Lieutenant," the captain said gravely. "What's your apartment?" 210, Building B. "But it doesn't make sense. How would he know where I live?" "Maybe you don't know exactly. You might be looking apartment by apartment." An idea formed in my mind. It was risky, possibly foolhardy, but it might work. "Captain, I have a proposal. If he's looking for me, we can use this to lure him to a controlled position, away from the remaining civilian." The captain narrowed his eyes. "What are you suggesting, Lieutenant?" "Let me enter the complex through the service entrance I mentioned. I can get to my apartment without being seen. If he's really looking for me, I can establish controlled contact via the building's intercom, making him believe I'm in a different location." "Absolutely not," the captain replied immediately. "That's a job for trained negotiators and tactical." "With all due respect, Captain, he's looking for a naval officer. I can speak his language, especially if she's military or ex-military, which seems likely given her attire and equipment. Besides, I know that compound like the back of my hand. It's too risky." "Life is risk, Captain. That's what I chose when I put on the uniform." Our debate was interrupted by another report over the radio. "Suspect is now in Building B, first floor. Checking mailboxes in the lobby. Looking for my name," I realized. "We don't have time, Captain," I insisted. "He'll find my apartment eventually, and he might hurt anyone in his path. Personally remove you. Are we clear?" "Perfectly, sir." We quickly devised a plan. I would enter through the underground parking garage, using the service stairs to reach the second floor without using the elevator or the main staircase. A SWAT officer would accompany me, keeping enough distance to provide cover without alerting the suspect. Once in position, I would use the intercom system to contact the lobby, where the suspect would likely still be. Equipped with a police-issued bulletproof vest and a small radio, I made my way to the designated entrance. My escort was a SWAT officer named Peterson, a tall, silent man who moved with the disciplined grace of someone with military training. "Ex-Army?" I asked quietly as we approached the entrance. He nodded once. "Special Forces, 8 years. You? Navy, 6 years. Defense Systems Officer." A brief smile appeared on her face. "Then you must be good at identifying threats and neutralizing them." "That's the plan," I replied, checking the vest once more. We entered the underground parking garage, moving quickly between the parked cars. The smell of oil and wet concrete filled the air, and our footsteps echoed faintly despite our efforts to maintain silence. We reached the service stairwell door without incident, and I punched in the familiar code, 1775. The door opened with a soft click, and we began climbing the metal steps. Peterson walked ahead of me, his gun low, ready to be raised in an instant. We reached the second floor, and he motioned for me to wait while he checked the hallway. Clean, he whispered, turning back to the door. Your apartment? Third door on the right. We moved quickly down the hallway, keeping close to the wall. When we reached my door, I took out my key and opened it silently, stepping into the familiar space of my small apartment. The lights were off, just as I'd left them, the only sound coming from the faint hum of the refrigerator. Peterson quickly checked the rooms while I headed to the intercom on the kitchen wall. This system allowed communication with the entrance hall and other apartments, a security feature we would now use to our advantage. We're in position, I whispered into the radio, preparing to make contact. Understood, Captain Russell's voice replied. Suspect is still in the lobby, reviewing the resident list. Shooters have partial visual through the front windows. Proceed when ready. I took a deep breath, exchanged a look with Peterson, who nodded in support, and pressed the intercom button for the lobby. Reception, this is Lieutenant Cooper in apartment 405. I deliberately gave the wrong apartment number. One on the 4th floor, away from civilians and with a better position for sniper. There was a moment of silence, and then the intercom crackled with a response. Lieutenant Cooper. The voice was deep, controlled, with a slight accent I couldn't immediately place. We meet at last. A chill ran down my spine. The familiarity in his voice suggested he knew me, but I couldn't place him. Who am I talking to? I asked, keeping my voice steady. You don't remember me? I'm hurt, Lieutenant. There was a dangerous note of amusement in his voice. Perhaps the name Petty Officer First Class Marcus Harmon means something to you? The name hit me like a punch in the gut. Marcus Harmon. A year ago, aboard the USS Monterey, I had led an investigation that resulted in his dishonorable discharge. Harmon had been caught selling prescription drugs from the ship's sickbay to other sailors. When confronted, he had sworn he was innocent, that he was being framed. The evidence, however, was conclusive. Harmon, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Yes, I remember. Peterson was looking at me with a raised eyebrow. I gestured to indicate that I would explain later. Good, Harmon replied. Very good. Because I've never forgotten your face, Lieutenant. I've never forgotten how you destroyed my career, my life, all based on lies. Those weren't lies, Harmon. You were caught with substantial evidence. I was just doing my job. A bitter laugh came over the intercom. Your job? Your job was to ensure justice, not to destroy a man's life based on circumstantial evidence. You didn't even listen to me. I signaled to Peterson to keep the line open as I whispered into the radio. Captain, the suspect is Marcus Harmon, former Navy petty officer. He was dishonorably discharged following an investigation I led into prescription drug trafficking aboard the USS Monterey approximately a year ago. Understood, came the low reply. Looking for information on him now. Keep engaging. I turned my attention back to the intercom. I heard you, Harmon. I heard your version, as well as the versions of 10 other people who witnessed your activities. The evidence wasn't circumstantial. We found the medications in your lodging, your fingerprint on the packaging, and bank transfer records matching the sales. Lies, shouted, his composure cracking. All planted. Kennedy was behind it all, but you were too busy trying to impress the captain with a big bust to see the truth. Kennedy was another petty officer who had testified against Harmon. One detail occurred to me. Kennedy lived in this same apartment complex, but was currently deployed at sea. So that's what you're doing here, Harmon? Looking for Kennedy? I asked, trying to buy time while the police positioned their teams. Kennedy's in the Gulf, replied with a sigh, as if explaining something obvious to a child. No, Lieutenant. I'm here for you. Only for you. To finish what you started. My radio vibrated softly. I glanced at the text message on the small display. Teams in position on the 4th floor. Snipers have visual on the lobby. Continue luring him up. If you want to confront me, Harmon, why don't you come to my apartment and we can talk? I suggested, keeping my voice calm. 405, just you and me. There was a moment of silence. Why would I believe you're alone? You probably have the whole police force waiting for me. Because I've never been one to hide behind others, Harmon. You know that. If there's a problem between us, we can solve it face to face, like military men. Another long silence. Then, okay, Lieutenant, I'm going up. But if I see a single officer, it'll just be the two of us. I lied. knowing the police already had strategic positions Harmon wouldn't be able to detect. The intercom went dead. I immediately reported to Captain Russell. He's on his way. Believe me, I'm at 405. Understood. Our teams are hidden at both ends of the 4th floor hallway. Once he exits the elevator, we'll have the advantage. Captain, he's Navy trained. He'll be looking for signs of an ambush. Trust us, Lieutenant. This isn't our first round. Peterson looked at. What do you want to do now? Stay here or move to a safer location? I considered it briefly. Staying in my apartment would be safer, but something told me Harmon wasn't as naive as he seemed. What if he was just pretending to believe my lie? Let's go to the 4th floor, I decided. If he finds out I'm not there, I want to be there when the police confront him. Peterson nodded, clearly approving of my decision. Let's use the service stairs again. I'll go first. We left my apartment silently and returned to the service stairs. As we ascended, I heard the distant sound of the main elevator moving. Harmon was on his way. We reached the 4th floor, and Peterson signaled to a SWAT officer positioned discreetly at the end of the hallway. The officer gestured for us to stay back, out of sight, in the stairwell. The seconds dragged by like hours. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, adrenaline coursing through my body. Despite the danger, a strange calm washed over me, the same calm I felt during combat simulations aboard the ship. My mind was clear, focused. Finally, we heard the soft ding of the elevator. Reaching the 4th floor, the doors opened. The next few moments were pure confusion. Instead of the methodical confrontation we expected, we immediately heard the crack of rifle fire. Harmon had emerged from the elevator firing, clearly expecting an ambush. The SWAT officers returned fire, and the corridor filled with the deafening sound of gunfire and the acrid smell of gunpowder. "We have officers down!" came the shout over the radio. I repeat, officers down. Peterson immediately sprang into action, motioning for me to stay back. But I couldn't stand by while people were being hurt because of me. Ignoring his instructions, I ran into the hallway, keeping low. The scene was chaotic. 2 SWAT officers lay slumped near the elevator, while Harmon had barricaded himself behind a decorative column in the center of the hallway. He had clearly planned this, knowing the building's design offered such strategic cover. "Harmon," I shouted, positioning myself behind another column about 10 meters away. "Stop this now. There's still a way out for you." His response was a volley of gunfire in my direction, forcing me to duck as fragments of the column flew around me. "There's no way out, Lieutenant!" he yelled back. "Not after you destroyed my life. My wife left me. My kids haven't seen me in months. I can't even get a job cleaning toilets because of the dishonorable discharge on my record." Another SWAT officer crept up from the other side of the hallway. Harmon saw him and fired but missed, giving the officer time to "This will only make things worse, Harmon." I tried again. "Think about your children. Will they want to know that their father died in a senseless shooting?" There was a moment of silence. For a moment, I thought my words had touched a nerve. "My children already think I'm a criminal. Thanks to you," he replied, his voice calmer now, almost resigned. "At least now they'll know I fought against injustice." "This isn't fighting injustice. It's creating more victims," I argued, desperately trying to reach him. "If you were truly framed, there are legal ways to prove it. I can help you open an inquiry, re-examine the evidence." A bitter laugh was his response, as if the system that destroyed me would save me. "You're even more naive than I thought, Luke." Peterson had moved closer to me. "We have snipers in the windows of the opposite building," he whispered. "They're waiting for a clear line of sight." I nodded, understanding what this meant. If we couldn't get Harmon to surrender, the only option would be to neutralize him by force. "Marcus," I called him by his first name, trying for a more personal approach. I was the investigating officer, yes, but I wasn't the only one responsible for the decision. If there was a mistake, we can correct it. But no one will hear your story if you die today. "My name is Petty Officer Harmon to you," he snapped, but there was a different tone in his voice, less anger, more pain. "You have no idea what it's like to lose everything. Your stepfather was right, you know. I heard you on the intercom with him earlier today. You're finished in this family." That's just a taste of what I felt. A chill ran down my spine. Had Harmon been watching me, hearing my argument with Richard? How long had he been following me? "You followed me to my mother's house?" I asked, trying not to show how disturbing I found this information. I've been following you for weeks, Lieutenant, he admitted, studying your patterns, your routines, waiting for the perfect moment. Your stepfather has a temper, doesn't he? He doesn't much like your Navy career. Funny, considering he was in the military himself. My mind was racing. If Harmon had been following me for weeks, he knew my movement. Maybe he knew about my friends, my family. So you heard me arguing with my stepfather, I said, trying to keep him talking as I watched out of the corner of my eye for movement. Other SWAT officer, discreetly positioning himself for a better angle, and decided this was the right time to act? It wasn't quite like that, he replied. I had already planned everything for today. I knew you'd be at the family dinner. You always go on Sundays. Plan was to wait for you to get home and well, finish this. But then you ran off after that call, and I had to improvise. So you decided to come to the compound and cause panic? I wanted you to know I was coming, he said, his voice now almost calm. I wanted you to feel the same fear I felt when the military police invaded my bunk, the same public humiliation. I saw an opportunity for connection. I know what public humiliation feels like, Harmon. I grew up constantly having to prove myself to my stepfather, to my superiors, to any man who thought I didn't belong in the Navy. Don't compare your fight to mine, Lieutenant, he replied, but his tone was less hostile. You still have your uniform, your career, and you can have your future back? I insisted, but not this way. Surrender now, and I promise to do everything in my power to ensure yours is reviewed fairly. A long silence followed. The SWAT officers were now in position, ready to act at the first green light. The radio on my vest vibrated softly. A message from Captain Russell. Snipers have visual confirmation. Awaiting your word. I swallowed hard. I didn't want it to end like this. Despite everything Harmon had done, there was a part of me that wondered if he might be telling the truth. And even if he wasn't, he was a veteran, someone who had served his country, someone whose life had fallen apart. Marcus, I called again, this time completely abandoning protocol. No one needs to die today. Put down your gun. Let's have a real conversation. No police, no Navy, just two people trying to find the truth. Another silence. Then, to my immense relief, I heard the sound of metal hitting the floor. He had placed the rifle on the floor. If I do this, her voice came shaking. Will you really help me clear my name? I will do everything I can. I promise. I can't guarantee the outcome, but I can guarantee that your case will be heard fairly. How can I trust you? Because I'm like you, Marcus. I serve by the same oath. Honor, courage, commitment. That still means something. A few more seconds of silence. Then, okay, Lieutenant, I'm leaving. Hands up. Slowly, Harmon emerged from behind the column, hands raised, above his head. Without the rifle, he seemed smaller, more vulnerable. His eyes met mine, and I saw in them not the monster I'd imagined, but a broken, desperate man. The SWAT officers moved in quickly, tackling him to the ground and handcuffing him. He didn't resist, keeping his eyes fixed on me throughout. You promised, he said, as he was lifted up. And I will comply, I replied firmly. As Harmon was being led away, medical teams entered the hallway to tend to the wounded officers. To my immense relief, none were critically injured. One had been grazed by a bullet in the shoulder. Another had been hit in the vest. Captain Russell appeared beside me, his face a mixture of relief and rebuke. That was extremely risky, Lieutenant, he said, but there was a tone of respect in his voice. But it worked. Good job. Thank you, Captain. What happens to him now? He will face serious charges: attempted murder, assault on police officers, illegal possession of a firearm. The list is long. I nodded gravely. I understand. But I'd like to formally register my commitment to help revisit the case that led to his dismissal. I'm not saying he's innocent, but everyone deserves to be heard. The captain studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. I'll include that in the report. Now, we need your full statement. And I imagine you'll want to call your family, my family. With all the adrenaline and chaos, I'd almost forgotten about the argument with Richard, the bitter words we'd exchanged. Yes, I definitely need to call home. Peterson appeared, extending his hand. It was an honor to work with you, Lieutenant. You kept your cool under pressure in a way few others could. I shook her hand, grateful for the recognition. Thank you. You were exceptional too. As we walked out of the building, I tried to process everything that had happened. The argument with Richard, the situation with Harmon, my promise to help review his case. It was too much to take in at once. Outside the complex, the street was filled with police cars, ambulances, and news outlets. Reporters tried to get closer, but police officers maintained a security perimeter. I found a quiet spot near an ambulance and grabbed my phone. I needed to call my mom first, reassure her, let her know I was okay. But before I could dial, I saw a familiar car pulling into the street, Richard's old Chevy. The car screeched to a halt a few feet from the police checkpoint, and Richard ran out, followed by my mother and Charlie. They were arguing with an officer at the checkpoint, Richard gesturing frantically in my direction. I walked toward them, still wearing my bulletproof vest, suddenly aware of how I must have looked exhausted, maybe a little scratched from the spinal fragments, but alive. The officer saw me waving and let my family pass. Richard was the first to reach me, surprising me by wrapping me in a crushing hug. "Thank God," he murmured, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Thank God. You're okay." When he released me, I saw tears in his eyes, something I'd never witnessed before. My mother was next, crying openly as she hugged me. Charlie joined in, turning the moment into a group hug. When we finally broke apart, Richard cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable with his public display of emotion. How did you know?" I asked. "It was on the local news," my mother explained, still holding my arm as if she feared I'd disappear. "They said there was an active shooter situation at your apartment complex, and that a Navy SEAL was involved in the negotiations. We knew immediately it was you," Charlie added, his eyes shining with a mixture of concern and admiration. Richard was still watching me intensely, as if he were seeing me for the first time. "Richard," I began, not quite sure what to say after our argument. "No," he interrupted me, holding up a hand. "I go first." He took a deep breath. I was wrong. The words hung in the air between us, surprising in their simplicity. "What? I was wrong," he repeated, more firmly this time. "About you? About your career? About many things." He looked down, then back up at my eyes. "When I heard you'd rushed into a dangerous situation, I was furious. I thought you were being reckless, putting your life at risk unnecessarily. I understand. But then," he continued, "when we were driving here, something occurred to me. You weren't running toward danger. You were running toward your responsibility, just like I would have." He paused, as if the next words were difficult. "Just like your biological father would have." The mention of my father took me by surprise. Richard rarely spoke of him. "Your father was a brave man, Alexandra," he continued. "When that storm hit, he could have gone back with the other boats, but he stayed to help a ship in trouble. He died a hero." Richard swallowed. "And today, you acted like his daughter." I felt unexpected tears burning my eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," he replied. "Just ... forgive me for not seeing it sooner, for not respecting your choices. You are an exceptional officer, Alexandra, and I am proud of you." The words I'd been waiting to hear for over a decade finally arrived, and I found I could barely speak around the lump in my throat. "I'll take the patrol back," Richard said with a small smile, referring to our earlier discussion. "You've proven your point." I couldn't help but hiccup, with laughter through the tears that were now streaming freely down my face. "All it took was an active shooter, huh?" Richard laughed too, the sound breaking the tension. "I hope we don't have to repeat that lesson." Charlie, ever perceptive, realized we needed a moment alone. "Mom, let's see if we can get everyone some coffee." He gently pulled my mother toward him, who nodded in understanding, giving me one last hug before walking away. When we were alone, Richard put his hands in his pockets, a gesture I recognized as his way of gathering courage. "Alexandra, I never intended to replace your father," he said quietly. "But over the years, I've come to think of you as my daughter. And I think maybe my fear of losing you like we lost your father made me want to keep you safe, away from harm." "I understand that now," I replied. "But you must understand, I chose this life, and I'm good at what I do." "Yes, you are," he agreed. "The best. From what I've heard some cops say." A proud smile crossed his face. "They said you talked an armed and dangerous man into surrender. That's something." I thought of Harmon, his anger, his pain, his sense of injustice. "He was a broken man who needed to be heard, and you listened to him when no one else would," Richard said. That's what makes you not only a good officer, but a good person, Alexandra. Thank you, I said simply. Then, taking a chance, I added, Dad. Richard's eyes widened slightly, and I saw in them an emotion he rarely displayed. He cleared his throat, visibly moved. Well, he said finally, I think we need to celebrate your pending promotion. How about we do that dinner again? No arguing this time. I smiled, feeling as if a weight of years had been lifted from my shoulders. I'd like that very much. When my mother and Charlie returned with coffees for everyone, they found us animatedly discussing my upcoming deployment. To their surprise, Richard was asking genuinely interested questions about the aircraft carrier and my role there. Watching my family gathered together, my mother with her relieved smile, Charlie absorbing every word about my naval career, and Richard finally accepting me as the officer I chose to be, I felt a sense of completeness that had eluded me for so long. The following week, I made good on my promise to Harmon. I used my contacts in the JAG Judge Advocate General's Corps to initiate a review of its case. I don't know if he was truly innocent or guilty, but ensuring he received a fair trial seemed like the least I could do. Most surprising, however, was Richard's support in this effort. When I mentioned the case during our rescheduled dinner, he immediately offered assistance. His years as a Marine had given him connections that could be useful. Every soldier deserves a fair hearing, he said, his tone brooking no argument, especially when it's about something that could destroy their entire life. As we sat on the porch of my parents' house that night, watching the lights of the ships in the bay, Richard offered me a glass of whiskey, a ritual he had always reserved for Charlie and his closest friends, never for me. To your promotion, he toasted, raising his glass. Lieutenant Commander Cooper. It's not official yet, I reminded him with a smile. It will be, he said with absolute confidence. And when it is, I'll be there, in the front row, prouder than any father ever was. We clinked glasses, the clinking of glass sealing a new understanding between us. Looking out at the horizon where the great military ships stood out against the night sky, I felt a calm certainty that, whatever challenges my career might bring, I would no longer face the greatest of them, the desire for approval from the man who raised me. 3 months later, I was officially promoted to lieutenant commander. As promised, Richard stood in the front row, wearing his Marine Corps dress uniform, unshed tears shining in his eyes as I received my new insignia. And when I boarded the USS Abraham Lincoln 2 weeks later, it was with the full blessing of my family. Not just their reluctant acceptance, but their enthusiastic support. The night of the shooting changed many things. It changed how Richard saw me. It changed how I saw him. And perhaps most importantly, it changed how I saw myself, not just as an officer doing her, but as someone capable of making a difference. One person for another, one life for once. Regarding Harmon's case, the review revealed significant procedural flaws in his original court-martial. While the evidence against him wasn't completely dismissed, there were serious questions about his chain of custody. After a year of legal battles, in which Richard surprisingly emerged as one of his most ardent defenders, Harmon received an amendment to his record from a dishonorable discharge to a general discharge. It wasn't a complete exoneration, but it was enough for him to rebuild his life, find a job, and begin reconnecting with his children. The last time I heard from him, he was working as a counselor for struggling veterans, eying his own experience of fall and redemption to help others facing the same abyss. Sometimes, when I'm on duty on the flight deck of the aircraft carrier, watching fighters take off in the darkness, I think of that night and Richard's words. You're finished in this family. Words spoken in anger, born of fear and misunderstanding, now transformed into their opposite. I'm not finished, I'm just beginning. And finally, I know that my whole family is with me every step of the way.